Imagine a world where the President of the United States can simply erase the consequences of the most explosive criminal allegations before a jury even reaches a verdict. What if a single blockbuster legal decision could not only reshape the lives of celebrities but also shake the very foundations of public trust in American justice? This isn't the premise of a dystopian movie. This is the real debate swirling around the possibility that Donald Trump could pardon Sean Diddy Combs, one of hip-hop's wealthiest and now most controversial figures. Today, we're diving deep into a story that blurs the lines between power, fame, the law, and the future of accountability in an era dominated by viral headlines and billion-dollar brands. Is this about justice, politics, or something even bigger? Let's set the scene. Sean Combs, known this world over as Diddy, Puff Daddy, P. Diddy, has been a colossus of American culture for decades. He's not just a chart-topping artist or a party-starting icon. Diddy built an empire from Brooklyn streets to Wall Street, turning Bad Boy Records into a launchpad for superstars like Notorious B.I.G. and Mary J. Blige. Along the way, Combs broke barriers for black entrepreneurs and came to symbolize hip-hop's raw ambition and crossover power. But today, Diddy sits in a New York courtroom, not a recording studio. Prosecutors allege a chilling story: more than 20 years of sex trafficking, racketeering, and orchestrating what the government has called a sprawling criminal enterprise. Multiple women have testified that Combs coerced them into exploitative, drug-fueled events, while civil lawsuits stack up, alleging sexual abuse, intimidation, and violence. The stakes? Life in prison if convicted on all federal counts. And for Combs, the collapse of a legacy built over decades. Why does this case matter so much to the world outside the courtroom? Because it's not just about one man. It's about how the U.S. system treats its most powerful and wealthy citizens when the allegations are this severe, and how presidential power might intervene. When President Trump was asked about the possibility of pardoning Diddy, he replied, "Nobody's asked. First, I'd look at what's happening." The non-answer set off alarm bells from Washington to Hollywood. Let's rewind and break down how we got here. Under Article 2, Section 2 of the U.S. Constitution, the president has sweeping power to grant pardons for federal crimes. Traditionally, this power is used sparingly, typically at the end of a president's term, and mostly for non-violent offenders or those considered to have been treated unfairly by the courts. But Donald Trump upended tradition while in office, issuing high-profile pardons to political allies and celebrities, sometimes well before the typical final day's rush. Why would a president, any president, consider intervening in a case like this? Sometimes it's about sending a message to a particular group, a base, an industry, or even a circle of wealthy donors. Sometimes it's about disrupting the system or grabbing headlines. Trump's willingness to wield the pardon power as a political tool instead of a last resort act of mercy changed the rules for everyone. Let's be absolutely clear. A presidential pardon only applies to federal crimes. That means even if Trump were to pardon Diddy, state charges in New York or civil lawsuits for financial damages could still proceed. A pardon in this case would be highly unusual before a conviction and would face intense scrutiny, said Alan Dershowitz, a constitutional law heavyweight. The political cost could be significant, especially given the current climate surrounding sexual abuse allegations. Now here's where things get even more complicated. The allegations against Diddy aren't just about isolated acts. Federal prosecutors claim that for more than 2 decades, he orchestrated coercion, violence, and elaborate drug-fueled freak-off events that left victims traumatized. 2 women told the court they were raped. At least one pop singer described seeing Diddy beat his girlfriend repeatedly. The defense admits that Diddy has sometimes been abusive in relationships, but argues these events were consensual and that the prosecution's case is built on shaky ground. At the same time, the cultural impact of a potential pardon is enormous. Diddy isn't just a musician. He's a brand, a billionaire, a symbol of the modern American dream. He's helped define hip-hop as a global business. What happens if a president pardons someone accused of some of the most egregious crimes imaginable before a jury even rules on the evidence? Barbara McQuaid, former U.S. attorney, offers a blunt assessment. While the president has broad pardon power, using it in a case like this would undermine the justice system and send a terrible message about accountability for serious crimes. She adds, it would be seen as a misuse of power for personal or political reasons. And then there's the human cost. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children warns, a pardon in a sex trafficking case, regardless of the individual involved, could have a chilling effect on victims coming forward and seeking justice. It is crucial that these crimes are taken seriously and that those responsible are held accountable. These voices highlight a central tension. Does the legal right to pardon outweigh the moral obligation to let justice run its course? Is it truly fair justice if a single politician's decision can brush aside the testimony of dozens of alleged victims? Now let's pull back and look at the political and economic consequences. If a Trump pardon were to come before any conviction, the fallout would reverberate beyond the courtroom. Legal precedent would be shattered. Civil rights organizations could lead mass protests. For the public, it could deepen cynicism about whether powerful men ever face consequences, especially when business and celebrity are involved. Imagine the impact on the music industry and major record labels. If a figure as prominent as Diddy can escape accountability thanks to political connections, what incentive do corporations have to clean up their acts or police abuse in their own ranks? Could such a decision lead companies to quietly shield their stars, fearful of lawsuits but emboldened by a perceived get-out-of-jail-free card at the highest level? The economic ripples don't end there. Diddy's holdings span spirits brands, entertainment ventures, and digital platforms. A pardon might not restore his place in polite society, but it could shift billions in brand value, licensing deals, and future projects. Would his partners welcome him back, or would the stain remain, forever a risk on their balance sheets? There's also the international dimension to consider. The U.S. has spent decades lecturing the world about transparency, justice, and accountability. If a high-profile pardon undercuts the seriousness of trafficking and abuse allegations, global allies may question America's moral authority, or use this as ammunition in their own battles against Western influence. Let's not forget public opinion. In recent years, the U.S. has grappled with its own reckonings over #MeToo, the abuse of power, and systemic inequality. A presidential intervention here could ignite a new wave of protests and raise uncomfortable questions about double standards in the law. And here's the wildest twist. Even a full presidential pardon wouldn't erase all of Diddy's legal woes. Prosecutors at the state level, especially in New York, could still pursue charges. Civil lawsuits could continue. The IRS could probe his finances. In effect, a federal pardon is a shield, not a full suit of armor. This brings us to a painful question. Is the presidential pardon power simply too broad? Should there be checks when the alleged crimes are so severe, or when the accused has friends in the highest places? The very existence of this debate exposes deep cracks in the system. For some, it's proof the U.S. is still a land of opportunity. For others, it's evidence that the game is rigged. In the courtroom, the drama shows no sign of letting up. The testimony turns more explosive every day, and Diddy's defense team continues to fight back, painting a picture of opportunism and overreach on the part of the prosecution. Meanwhile, in the White House, the president is asked, point blank, whether he'll intervene, and refuses to shut the door on the possibility. Will America's most powerful office be used to protect a fallen icon, or will this case become a defining test of law, accountability, and the limits of celebrity influence? As the nation holds its breath, one question looms. If Trump reaches for the pardon pen, what happens next? And does this decision end with a single man, or change the rules for everyone? Let's fast forward to the possible future, one where President Trump actually grants a pardon to Sean Diddy Combs before his federal trial even concludes. Imagine the scene. The world's media erupts as news breaks that Trump, citing old acquaintance and the facts, uses his presidential powers to wipe away the most explosive federal charges against one of hip-hop's most influential and controversial figures. No president in modern U.S. history has dared to pardon someone accused of such grave crimes before a single verdict is read. Suddenly, every corner of the American conversation explodes: social media, cable news, courtrooms, and the White House itself. What actually happens in the hours, days, and months after this hypothetical Trump pardon? First, the legal machinery shudders. On paper, a presidential pardon is absolute, at least for federal crimes. The charges from Manhattan's U.S. attorney vanish for Combs, even though prosecutors, witnesses, and, crucially, the alleged victims have not seen their day in court. The sex trafficking and racketeering accusations, the lurid details of freak-offs and allegations of systematic abuse, all, at least at the federal level, suddenly evaporate. But that's not the end. Not by a long shot. State prosecutors, unrestrained by Trump's pardon power, step up with renewed vigor. Remember, the president has no authority to wipe away state charges. In places like New York and California, where several of Combs' alleged crimes reportedly occurred, powerful state attorneys general see an opportunity, and perhaps even a duty, to pick up the baton. Civil lawsuits, too, charge ahead. Victims still have a legal pathway, seeking damages for trauma, pain, and suffering in courts where Trump's pardon means nothing. Yet even if state cases proceed, the precedent is set. For the first time, a U.S. president has used the pardon power not as a gesture of mercy for the reformed or unjustly convicted, but as a shield for a celebrity friend, before the jury even finishes its deliberations. The ripple effects are seismic. Headlines scream of outrage. Protesters amass outside courthouses from Manhattan to L.A. Justice for victims placards wave beside chants of no one above the law. Meanwhile, supporters of Trump and Combs point to witch hunts, media bias, and a history of political prosecutions. The country's old divides flare up anew, shaped now by the collision of stardom, power, and presidential prerogative. Legal scholars flood the airwaves. Alan Dershowitz, the Harvard constitutional expert, gets quoted everywhere. A pardon in this case would be highly unusual before a conviction and would face intense scrutiny. The political costs could be significant, especially given the current climate surrounding sexual abuse allegations. Barbara McQuaid, a former U.S. attorney, pulls no punches. Using the pardon power now for someone facing credible allegations of sex trafficking would undermine the justice system and send a terrible message about accountability for serious crimes. Victim advocacy groups like the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children release urgent statements. A pardon in a sex trafficking case, regardless of who is involved, could have a chilling effect on victims coming forward and seeking justice. Washington is paralyzed. Democrats demand hearings. Some Republicans distance themselves, wary of blowback. Laws are proposed to limit presidential pardon power, especially related to crimes of violence, sexual abuse, or ongoing investigations. Editorial boards call for a national reckoning about the scope and wisdom of unchecked executive mercy. But that's just the surface. In the music industry, CEOs and PR teams gather in closed-door meetings. If even a mountain of accusations in a major federal trial can be swept away by political connection, what's their liability next time one of their stars is accused? Do they double down on background checks, rethink contracts, or quietly prepare crisis plans for the next scandal? For everyday Americans, the pardon hits like a jolt. The case was already a flashpoint for debates about celebrity, race, and justice in America. Now, with the president's direct intervention, questions multiply. Is the whole system rigged for the rich and powerful? Does hard evidence matter, or just who you know? For the victims who came forward, often at enormous personal risk, the message is devastating. They see their harrowing testimony treated as collateral damage in a game of power. Some retreat into silence. Others find new cause to fight for systemic change. Organizations supporting survivors see a surge in calls, anger, and fear. And for Combs, the technical escape from federal conviction brings only partial relief. State charges, civil lawsuits, and the relentless court of public opinion remain. His reputation, already battered by months of testimony, may never recover. Endorsements vanish. Radio stations debate whether to pull his songs from playlists. Some fans stick by him out of loyalty or skepticism about the allegations, but many turn away, believing that his escape from justice was bought, pressured, or politicked away. But the most profound impact is intangible. The sense of trust, that the justice system operates by rules, not favoritism, takes a blow. If a celebrity can be pardoned before a verdict, who else might slip through the cracks? Every future high-profile trial carries a shadow. Will power trump justice again? Could this spark legal reform? Quite possibly. The outrage may force Congress to debate constitutional amendments or new laws narrowing the pardon power, especially in cases involving extreme violence or abuse, reminiscent of past efforts after presidents granted controversial pardons. Political scientists and legal analysts would point out, though, that changing the Constitution is a Herculean task. The debate over executive power, how far is too far, would be back in the headlines, not just for Trump, but for every president to come. And here's the twist. History shows that extraordinary uses of the pardon have sometimes triggered exactly this kind of reckoning. After President Ford pardoned Nixon for Watergate, the backlash led to decades of political caution around the use of executive clemency. The Diddy Trump episode may become a similar turning point, a reference point for new limits on presidential grace. So what does all this mean for you? Why should the story of Diddy, Trump, and this sensational trial matter in your own life beyond the headlines and hashtags? First, it's a stark lesson in the importance and fragility of public institutions. Democracy depends not just on written laws, but on a shared belief that those laws apply equally, no matter someone's fame, fortune, or political connections. The moment that belief cracks, cynicism seeps in. People disengage, feeling the system can't be trusted. That's when bad actors find more space to operate, and when even the most basic rights come under threat. Second, it's a powerful reminder of how much your voice matters in a democracy. Laws can be changed. Presidential powers, once considered untouchable, have, at key moments in history, been reined in because of public outrage and citizen action. If a Trump pardon for Diddy provokes you, if it seems like yet another sign that rules are for little people, that's the exact moment to speak up, organize, and demand reform. Third, the story exposes the tension at the heart of American justice, the need to balance mercy with accountability. The pardon power exists for a reason, to correct injustices and show compassion. But when that power is abused, especially to protect the powerful from consequences, it threatens to undermine everything it was meant to preserve. As citizens, we have to stay vigilant, watching not just for the crime, but for the misuse of mercy itself. So, what practical steps can viewers take? If you're motivated by what you've seen here, start by staying informed on how presidential powers function in real life. Look up how pardons have been used historically, both for good and for controversy. Support organizations that work for victims' rights and justice reform. Their voices are often drowned out in the celebrity glare. Don't accept the idea that things can't change. From the Watergate reforms to the Me Too movement, American history shows that real action comes when enough people demand it. Maybe most importantly, don't let cynicism win. When outrageous things happen in the news, they are a reminder that our systems need constant care. Every time you vote, write, or protest, you're helping shape what justice looks like for the next generation. And as for the future of presidential power and accountability, here's the bottom line. A Trump pardon for Diddy, especially before a verdict, would push American democracy into uncharted waters. It would expose the gaps in our laws and the dangers of unchecked authority. But it would also offer a chance, if we seize it, to demand better, to redefine what justice for all actually means, including the rich and famous. So, what would actually happen if Trump pardons Diddy before a verdict? The legal system would fracture, federal charges gone, but state and civil challenges remain. The public trust would be shaken. Victims and witnesses would feel betrayed. The debate over power and accountability would ignite, perhaps leading to reforms that affect every president and every American for years to come. But if there's a final lesson here, it's that power is only ever safe when watched closely. If you want justice to mean something, stay engaged. Don't look away. And now, here's a secret fact hidden behind the headlines. Despite the drama of presidential pardons, the Supreme Court has never directly ruled on whether a president can pardon someone who hasn't even been charged, let alone convicted. The ultimate limits of that power remain untested terrain, meaning this Diddy case could set a shocking new precedent, for better or worse. If you found this video thought-provoking, let us know in the comments. Should a president have the power to pardon anyone at any time? What reforms would you support? And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more deep dives into the